Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I am the founder of Fitness Uncharted, which is a women's health and fitness coaching company I created to help women lose stubborn fat, build muscle, improve their metabolism, and feel really freaking confident in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And today, guys, we are going to be talking a little bit about self talk and self compassion to help you get better fitness and health results. And I want to talk about this topic for a couple of reasons that came up for me. I was actually having a conversation with someone this past week, and she mentioned, I asked, why did she choose me as her coach? We were having like a discovery call before she signed up for coaching. And I asked her that question and, I always like to know like, hey, what is it for you that's resonated with you? Like, what is that thing? There's so many coaches and trainers out there. Why did you decide to go with me? And she was like, you know what? I was listening to your podcast and, first of all, I find it entertaining. So thank you for that. But she was also like, and I don't know, you have a layer of like self compassion that comes through where it's like you're trying to level up and you want to encourage others to level up and to push themselves, but it's striking that balance of like also at the same time having self-compassion and, being kind to yourself. And that like that comes through and that really resonates with me. And so I was thinking about that. And I think because it's a really important topic, because I feel like people fall into two camps oftentimes. We either have people who are really, really freaking hard on themselves and they're just like, literally name calling themselves and they are so hard on themselves to the point where they can't stay motivated or disciplined because they beat themselves into the ground. And then you have the other people who are on the like super self-love side of just like, you know, self positive talk and body positivity and all this stuff, which is not bad things, but then they're also tend to not take action. And they're like, you know what? I'm good the way I am and I'm just going to love myself and self-love is such a good thing, right? It's a great thing, but a lot of people can fall into the camp of I'm just going to accept myself the way I am. That's that. You don't like me, get over it, right? And I think it's finding that balance of like, okay, loving ourselves where we are at and having self-compassion, but also striving to become better, like not getting complacent where we're at. And this topic is really important because if we don't find that balance, we're never going to improve. We're never going to grow. And the thing is, a lot of people feel like they're lacking discipline. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I have around people like, I just can't stay disciplined. I keep falling off the wagon. Like, truth be told, I wouldn't have a job as a coach if accountability weren't such an important thing. I have coaches myself as a coach for accountability because I know myself and I know I will fall off the wagon. I will feel unmotivated. I won't feel like doing things. My own flesh will win at the end of the day when I'm feeling lazy or whatever or just procrastinating. But the thing is, like a lot of people feel like it's a lack of discipline or that they have some character flaw because of that. And that's just not true. Like, if that were the case, then how do you have people who are super disciplined at work or super disciplined with their profession or a hobby, but they lack discipline in fitness and nutrition? Like, how do you have that person? I mean, I know so many very successful people who are hella disciplined when it comes to their profession or workplace goals, when they are super disciplined with their finances. Like, I mean, they are money makers, money making machines. Like, they know how to be disciplined with their budget. They have these investments going, but they can't figure out the nutrition and fitness piece, right? That they wouldn't have that much discipline in these other areas of life if they have some character flaw with just simply self discipline, right? So it doesn't even make sense logically. It's not some just character flaw in you that you're like, oh, I just lack the discipline or the motivation. Motivation, first of all, is fleeting. You guys probably know at this point how I feel about motivation. Do not rely on motivation. And I think the next step is also not assuming that you just lack self discipline. So then what happens is, people when they think that, oh, I've just lacked self-discipline, I kind of need to prove to myself that I can do this or that I have self-discipline. So then what happens? They go gung ho on their fitness journey or on their fitness goals and they do some super restrictive diet and something that's probably not sustainable for 99.9% of the world. But they do it and they're like, okay, I'm going to like cut out all sugar, all carbs, all alcohol, all everything that remotely tastes good, or all my social life, and I'm just gonna go gung ho on this diet. And then they, of course, right, they don't stay consistent for more than like a week or maybe 2 at best. And then they just prove, quote unquote, prove to themselves that they don't have the discipline, right? When in reality, they did something that was unrealistic for anyone to stick to. And they expected 100% consistency when in reality, to get results, you only need like 80 to 90% consistency. Like you don't need to be perfect all the time. That's the first thing I tell my clients. And when they start out with my program, they often want to start at a quote unquote perfect time when they can really focus and really put their head down and do it. And I'm like, that doesn't even matter. Like throughout our program and our time together, you're going to have a ton of bumps in the road. You're going to have a ton of seasons of life that come up where you can't be perfect, and that's okay. That's literally what we're going to help you work through. So stop trying to go 100% at this thing. That's why you keep failing, is because you're trying to be 100% perfect at your diet or your activity. That's when you find a lot of people doing 75 hard. That's one of the reasons I don't care for 75 hard. I think it's trying to prove to yourself that you can do something hard for 75 days. And while that's fine, like if you just want to build the mental toughness and prove to yourself that you can do that, okay. But it's not actually getting to the core or the root of the issue. And that's where, so let's say you did do something for 75 days, you're working out twice a day, or, not having any cheats and eating perfectly and whatever. That's still not going to get you the real habit change. That's still not going to get you to the root cause of the issue of why you keep falling back into old habits and can't stay consistent or quote unquote disciplined. And so without a doubt, what's going to happen is, yeah, maybe you do the 75 hard and you stick to it. But if you don't get to the root of the issue, then like what's going to happen over time, say maybe it takes a year, even 2 years. But what's going to happen is you're probably going to end up right back to the same old habits eventually. The hype of staying consistent for 75 days might last for a little while, but eventually you're going to fall back into old patterns if you don't actually get to the root of the issue. So what happens and what I'm going to talk about today as far as the self-talk and self-compassion conversation is not letting yourself off the hook. It's actually a very logical conversation to have with yourself. Like what happens is when we mess up, we tend to talk really poorly to ourselves. We're like, gosh, I'm such an F up. Like, I have no discipline. Like, why the heck did I just do that? Like, gosh, like we have this awful self-talk, right? Just fill in the blank, whether you just overate or you just overslept or you've missed 3 workouts this week, whatever it is. We just talk really poorly to ourselves, and we deem it a character flaw on ourselves. But my question is like, okay, if you wouldn't talk to your best friend or let's say your kid that way, why would you talk to yourself that way? Seriously. Like berating someone is not even helpful. Like when your kid does something bad, like just as an example, let's say your kid does something bad, what do you do? Do you tell them that they suck and they're just a terrible kid at their core? Like at your core, you're just a bad person. You really suck. Like, no, you don't tell them that. If you do, that's a whole other conversation. This is not a parenting counseling podcast. If you do yell at your kids and tell them they suck because they messed up or made a mistake at their core, they're bad. You need to go probably talk to someone else and like get some parenting advice. That's not what I'm here to do right now. But like the 99% of people listening to this probably are not that parent. They're not going to just be like, you're a terrible kid. No, you're going to try to figure out like why they did what they did, right? Like, first and foremost, like, what is it that's going on inside? Like, why did you just do that? Why did you just hit your brother? Or why did you steal something or take something that wasn't yours? Or, why did you do that? And then that way you can learn and it can help them learn why that's not good to do. You need to figure out, okay, what's the motive? Why did they have this bad behavior? And then help teach them like, hey, this is not a good thing. And this is why. This is why it's not good. Like you need to teach them, not just slap their hand, but so that they don't do it in the future. You actually need to figure out why they did it, help them learn why it's not a good thing, and then teach them how they can avoid the bad behavior in the future and teach them in replacement what is the good behavior that we want. So take that exact principle of your kid and what you do in that process and apply that same thing to your health and fitness. Instead of like literally when you just yell at yourself for having the cookie or let's say the sleeve of Oreos that you didn't mean to have, you just slap your hand and you're like, gosh, I'm such an F up. Like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna be fat. Okay, whatever. F the fitness goals. Like falling off the wagon already. That's what I do, right? That's the slap on the hand for your kid without any context of telling them why it's not good. Let's figure out what happened, what we need to do in the future. That's literally the equivalent of that. The same thing applies to your health and fitness. Why would you just slap yourself on the hand or freaking slap yourself upside the head, right? Some of you are so harsh to yourself. You're like slapping yourself across the face every time you mess up on your fitness journey. So instead, what should we do? Like, say for instance, when you overeat, let's just say that's probably one of the most common ones is overeating. And instead of going, gosh, like you are just such a glutton, like what a fat ass, like you are such a loser. You have no discipline. Like this is what I do. This is just who I am. Instead, like that is actually not helpful. That does literally nothing to help you from not doing it in the future. So instead, actually ask yourself like why that happened. Like try to figure out and actually get the coherent answer and something that makes sense. Like there's going to be a reason. Why did that happen? And try to figure that out. Like is it because you were anxious? Is it because you were tired or bored? Like actually self-reflect because if you can think, maybe you were feeling really anxious. Like I was just the other day like right after a phone call that I had and I had some things going on and I was just kind of like mindlessly eating things in the kitchen. Like I ate like a whole bag of kettle popcorn and like some other stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And I could literally be like, wow, you suck. Like, but instead I'm like, why did that just happen? I'm like, I was having this anxiety and the food was actually helping me cope with the anxiety. And so that actually makes sense why I did that. Okay. I don't want to do that every time I feel anxious. So like how can I help avoid that by, whether that's talking to a friend or just getting out of the kitchen, like bringing myself back into the moment and into reality. Maybe that's speaking out loud like, "Hey Megan, you're eating popcorn, way too much of this popcorn right now. Like, put it away." Or "I'm going to eat this popcorn," like label it, like speak it out loud, bring presence and awareness back to what you're doing. Whatever that looks like, that's actually way more productive than me just telling me that myself that I suck. Like that doesn't actually help. So instead of calling yourself stupid and dismissing it as a character flaw, like look for the reasoning as to why that happened. Look for the reason why, because there is an answer. There's always a reason. And if you can get down to that root issue of why that keeps happening, you can actually do something about it. And like this is not just a positive self-talk lesson. That's what I don't want this to be is like there's so much beauty and purpose behind having positive self-talk, but this is actually like the logical thing to do if you want to figure out solutions for why you keep falling off the wagon. The unlogical thing to do is to just call yourself names and to claim that you lack self-discipline or motivation. Like that's actually not logical. It's not productive. It's not going to help you improve. If you can actually find the reasoning, then you can figure out solutions on how to avoid this in the future. And also speaking of the wagon, I wanted to say this along with falling off the wagon, like I think most people assume that they are just a failure if they fall off the wagon. And, we all want to avoid falling off the wagon. But the thing is, everyone falls off the wagon. I fall off the wagon. I fell off the wagon last weekend, literally just last weekend. And that's part of the journey to success. I think we're all so scared of failing and falling off the wagon, and we've treated it like we are a failure if we do fall off the wagon. And, diet culture and past dieting history has taught us, man, if we fall off, we failed. When in reality, as long as you keep getting back up and you learn from it, that's literally a part of the journey to success is falling off the wagon. And an example of this, I actually heard this the other day on a podcast. So I can't take credit for this example, but I can't remember which podcast it is because I listen to so many podcasts. So I can't remember. Someone was being interviewed on someone else's podcast. And I can't remember. I'm so terrible with details sometimes. But there was an example they gave of smoking. Like, let's say you are a smoker or you were a smoker, and let's say you are trying to quit and you go like a year without smoking, and which is awesome, right? And then you fall off the wagon and you smoke again. Dang it. Okay. And then let's say you try again and you fall off 6 months later. Dang it. Okay. So you try again to stop smoking. And let's say you go 3 years and that's amazing. And then you fall off again. Okay. Like just, okay, play that out, right? However long it takes for you to fall off again and again and again. Finally, 10 years later, a decade later, you quit and you've quit for good. Like you never smoke again. You prove to yourself it's been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that you have quit smoking. Does that mean that every past attempt that you tried to quit smoking was a failure? Like when you made it a year without smoking, was that a failure? No, it wasn't. It was a stepping stone to you really making it all the way to quitting smoking. Or when you fell back off 6 months later or a couple years later or whatever. Those are not failures. That is a part of the process. And whatever had to take place, whatever had to happen, physically, psychologically, for you to really quit for good, you were literally taking the steps and building upon that to finally achieve long-term success with quitting smoking. So the same thing applies to your fitness and nutrition journey is like all those little mini failures. We're getting better and better if we have the right perception of it and we look at it the right way as a chance for progress and growth. So next time you make a mistake or you quote unquote fall off, what I want you to do is try checking your self-talk. Like, how are you talking to yourself? Go back to the analogy of talking to your best friend or to your kid, your child. How would you actually talk to them and talk it through with them to help them versus just berating them, right? Like if it was your best friend, you would hash it out with her. Like maybe she made a bad relationship decision. Instead of being like, you're a freaking idiot. I told you that guy sucked and you suck because you didn't listen to me. Like, okay, there are some friends who would do that. Let's be real. I have some blunt friends myself like that. Like maybe they do say that, but at the end of the day, they're gonna hash it out. Like you're gonna have those heart-to-heart conversations of like, what do you see in him? Why are you staying in this relationship? What can we do? Like, are you willing? What are your non-negotiables? What are you willing to accept versus what are you not willing to accept? Like, do you see yourself with this person? Right? You're like actually hashing it out with them and figuring out the reasoning versus just telling them they suck. So always go back to, to talking to yourself that same way and don't dismiss yourself or just label yourself as quote unquote bad or quote unquote undisciplined because that's not actually helpful at all. Do the actual work to figure out the why. That's way more helpful if you actually figure out why this is happening. And I can speak from my own experience with my binging and restricting past. Once I actually figured out the why, I was able to get to the root cause of my binging and restricting. I was really unhappy in my job at the time. I was feeling anxious. I was unhappy in my just position in life, where I was in life. And food was a coping mechanism for me and something that I felt in control of, something that brought me temporary pleasure. And that's once I realized those things and realized I wasn't just a failure and I didn't just live in the shame of binging and I was actually able to like get to the root of that is when I actually started to break that cycle of binging and restricting. There is always a reason. Like if you're just feeling ashamed or feeling guilt about doing something that you don't want to be doing. What's that Bible verse? I don't remember which verse it is. It's like basically, why do I do the things that I don't want to do and the things that I want to do, I don't do, is basically what it's saying is like, gosh, why am I this way? Why do I keep doing the things I don't mean to do? Because we're human and the flesh takes over. And that's where like, instead of demonizing yourself, figure out why it's happening. There's always a reason. And until you uncover what that is, you will stay stuck on the same hamster wheel, making the same mistakes. So don't just talk positive to yourself in like a woo woo way, but do talk compassionately to yourself, just like you would a friend or your child, and figure out why it's going on. then you can start to make progress and you can start to make changes for the better. Okay. So, anyway, you guys, I hope this is helpful for you. I hope this was encouraging. I hope this actually gives you some tangible ways of talking to yourself in a better way that's going to help you make progress. And if you are loving the podcast, then leave us a 5-star rating. And if you feel so inclined, even leave a review. That helps get the podcast in front of more people and is one of the biggest ways that you could help support the Muscle Makeover, because the more people review and rate the show, the more it will recommend it to other people who like similar podcasts and things like that. And I know there's a lot of ladies and people in general, but out there who need to hear this message. So that would mean so, so much to me. We appreciate that so very much. So thank you for that. And until next time, you guys, be kind to yourself and make it an amazing day.